Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 799 of the Juicebox Podcast. On today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast, we'll be speaking with Michael. Michael's in his early 60s. He's a teacher, a musician, and he has type 2 diabetes. That's right, today is another in the Type 2 Stories series, as I try to have as many conversations as I can with people living with type 2 diabetes so that we can understand it more fully. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you have type 1 diabetes or are the caregiver of someone with type 1 and are a U.S. resident, I'm asking if you'll please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and fill out the survey. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Join the registry, complete the survey. Whole thing should take you fewer than 10 minutes. You're going to be helping people with type 1 diabetes, moving type 1 diabetes research forward, and you might even be helping yourself. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Today's podcast is also sponsored by the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. Get yourself accurate results with this easy to carry, easy to use, and beautifully made blood glucose meter. contournext.com/juicebox. Check out the Contour Next One. There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to Gvoke, Contour Next One, and all of the sponsors. When you click on the links, you're supporting the podcast.
Hi, everybody. This is Michael. I'm a type 2 diabetic since 2006, and I live in Oklahoma.
2006. That's a good long time. That's excellent. Not excellent for you. It's excellent for the conversation. Why do you have such a nice microphone, Michael?
Oh, well, I'm a musician.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and a music teacher. And during the pandemic, I did quite a bit of teaching from home. Mm-hmm. So I put together really good gear. I actually had a better camera than this, but I know we didn't need a camera, so I didn't set all that up.
Yeah.
But I had to have good sound to effectively teach. How's my level?
Listen, besides Jenny, you're going to sound the best anybody's ever sounded on this podcast. So it's terrific.
I understand.
Yeah. I just sent Jenny a new microphone.
Oh, good idea.
And you can really, she had a good one. Well,
yeah.
And then I got her a better one. And then one day I was like, what am I doing? I just sent her a really good mic and she sounds terrific now. So
people always ask me if I'm a podcaster. Because when I do Zoom meetings, I've got all this good gear.
Yeah. I actually have a second computer that you can't see. So when I do business stuff, I'm not sitting in front of this microphone talking to people because...
That's a good idea,
It became obvious to me that people were just the whole time like, what's that thing in his... Why is he wearing headphones, Anyway, so, I guess I'd like to really... I'm doing my best. It's funny, you corresponded with me the other day and you were almost like, do you really still want to do this? Because you haven't had many type 2s on, but it is not for a lack of trying.
Gotcha.
And as a matter of fact, I had an interesting conversation. I don't think I should say with the company, which company it was, but I had an interesting conversation the other day with my liaison at one of the companies. And I said, you guys are going to get more into type 2 in the next couple of years, right? And they's like, yeah, we want to. And I said, well, I want to as well. I'm trying to have more type 2s on the podcast. It's very difficult to get them to talk about it. And I feel like I understand why, but it wasn't an impediment for you. So my first question is, did you have any thoughts of like, oh, I don't want to do this, or do you not mind people knowing?
I had none of those thoughts. I actually like talking to people about it, particularly people in the same kind of situation that I was in. Mm-hmm. So, no, I have no reservations whatsoever.
I appreciate that.
I think listening to the podcast is one of the reasons why. You have so many people on in there, they're also forthcoming for the most part. And I thought, well, I've got a story and I've got things that I can share that are not only similar but different. Yeah. I think there will be some unique things about my story that you may not have heard before.
Okay. Well, I'm thrilled about this. I really am. I want so much for people with type 2 to be able to understand their situation better. I feel like I speak to a lot of people with type 2 who just, this thing is happening to them and they're on a ride, and wherever it leads them is where it's going to lead them. And I don't think that needs to be the case for them. So I guess
Agreed.
Tell me, how old were you when you were diagnosed?
Let's see, 2006. I'm terrible with
How old?
math.
Listen, how old are you now?
I'm 63.
63.
Yeah, so you do the math for me.
Let's see, 2006 to 16 is 10, and then 4 more gets you to 20, and then 2 more gets you to 22, so that's 16. Now we take 6 minus 3, so it's 4, carry a 1, hold on a second, 5, 6, 7, and then that's now a 5. You were 47.
Okay.
There we go.
I was pre-diabetic for many years. My mother was diabetic her entire adult life. My sister is very severely diabetic. So I knew it was coming, and I still didn't do anything about it.
Knew it was coming, like you saw symptoms and similarities, or just you thought, this has to happen to me, it's happening to everybody else?
A little of both, but I had doctors telling me, I've always been overweight, and the doctors knew my history, and it's like, you're pre-diabetic and you need to change your ways or it's going to happen to you.
Was there anything about their warning that led you to change preemptively, or no?
Not a thing.
No.
I have had a very busy life and career, and I just basically ignored it for a long time until I couldn't ignore it anymore.
What happened that made it impossible to ignore?
Well, I did doctor a lot. I have a couple of other things that are, major health issues, and they check your blood sugar, and they just kept saying, you're there. And I didn't really feel symptoms like excessive thirst and, excessive urination for a few years after that. They immediately put me on metformin and glimepiride and a couple other things, so I took pills for a long time. And metformin, for me, has been toxic, which is part of my story. I just pretty much took the pills and ate what I wanted to, hardly ever exercised. I worked a ton, raised a family, all that. It's just basically something that I had to take pills for. And, we all know now, I was so uneducated, it was ridiculous. We all know now that,
It's not enough.
That's going to catch up to you. And it did. It clearly did catch up to me.
I have a question. Two questions, actually. When they're telling you you're there, do they give you context to that? An A1C or?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what it was?
I don't remember. No, I can't remember. I do know the highest my A1C has gotten through all of this was 8.9, which, isn't ridiculous. My sister sometimes is, in the teens.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
She's as a type 2.
Yes.
Is she, oh gosh, I'm not as practiced as these conversations, but do you have to eat yourself to an A1C like that? Or is it a severity level inside of your body and doesn't matter what happens? Just some people have higher A1Cs.
Yeah, I think, it's a little of both with her. She's, really taking care of herself now, but still struggling. Sometimes her A1C is great. Other times it's really high. She sometimes has blood sugar levels in the 500s. And she has infections in her feet that have gotten really bad. Wow. So, she's been hospitalized several times for these infections and almost lost one of her feet.
Oh, gosh.
And she's not, she's so scared to death of it now. It's not a matter of her food intake.
Okay.
There's something else going on with her, and her diabetes is much more severe than mine is.
Her body's just, yeah. And I want to be clear about when I said food intake, I didn't mean like, it's weird. I didn't mean just like massive overeating. I just meant I meant carbs that your body can't cover. Like you putting in more carbs than your system can handle.
Yeah.
But that's something else. Okay. So back to you, you're there, but you still wait a little bit. But then once I'm going to guess they push the pills on you, right? At some point, does somebody try to scare you in a doctor's office, or do you get one of those conversations?
No. I have great doctors, you know, and they're not scaring me. They're just saying, you know, we need to treat this, and this is how we treat it. Bam. Okay. And I'm doing it. Right. And then, you know, I graduated to injectables, and I did that for a long, long time until actually a year ago when I went MDI.
Okay. So you started with metformin.
Yeah.
But did it leave you with a feeling of like, oh, I'm taking the pill now, so I don't have to change anything?
Exactly.
Okay.
Bingo. You know, it was just a kind of a thing I did every day, and I ignored it. I hardly ever checked my levels. Mm-hmm. And I did that for, you know, longer than 10 years.
10 years. 10 years, you're taking the metformin, eating what you want.
Yes.
Not really checking your blood sugar. When you say not really checking your blood sugar, daily, weekly, how do you do it?
Oh, just every once in a while. Mm-hmm. So, you know, sometimes I'd go months without checking it. You know, my brain was like, you're taking the pills. It's okay. They check your A1C in the doctor's office, and, you know, it would get up to 7 something. I wrote it 7.2, 7.3 for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. So then it started creeping up a little bit, and I got an endocrinologist, and he got me down to like 6.5 with other medications. That's when I went on Trulicity and some other things. I was still on metformin.
Before we talk about that, let me ask one last kind of backward-looking question.
Sure.
With 16 years of hindsight, taking the pills, I'm okay, I'm taking the pills. Did you believe that? Or did you talk yourself into believing it? Or is that what do you know what I'm saying? Like, or was it just a convenient way to ignore what was happening?
Yeah, it was more that. You know, I was, like I said, working a lot, and I have other health issues that were bothering me too. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of just head in the sand, you know, about my health in general. It wasn't a priority. Let me put it that way.
Are you comfortable sharing your other health issues, or are they not
pertinent? Sure. No. Yeah. I have psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, which is an autoimmune thing. Mm-hmm. And I take some pretty heavy medication for that. You know, and some other things, but those are the biggies. Those are the 2 biggies in my life.
Okay. So the idea there is it's cascading, right? You pick what seems like the worst thing at the moment, and you focus on that. You go to doctor's appointments, you use up your thought process, your cycles on that, and then there's nothing left for the rest of it afterwards. Is that about right?
Yes. I think that's a really great way to characterize it.
Yeah. I've noticed that in even my own life with myself, or helping my kids. There's just not enough hours in the day. There's not enough energy. There's not enough time. You still have to work, and I don't know. It's like the house is burning down. Just put the water where the biggest fire is how it feels sometimes.
You know? It's procrastination and taking the easiest path for the moment because you've got everything hitting you. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's pretty much the way I live my life.
Part of what I noticed with Arden is that even after you stop everything and you think, okay, I'm going to focus on this problem, and you find what looks like a direction, and you decide, I'm going to handle this. And then you go to the doctor, and you leave the doctor, and it doesn't feel like anything happened. And you go, well, this whole thing was just a waste of time. We're not getting anywhere. You know, the truth is, though, it's persistence. Like, you just have to keep hammering away, and you have to have the mind to collate everything, or to make lists and draw lines and make yourself see the connections, you know, because I do think, as great as some doctors are, it is still on you a little bit to connect the dots. A lot, maybe.
No doubt. Yeah. No doubt about that. Yes. You know, and if you put it off, it's going to be harder and harder. It's just like any habit that you need to form. Mm-hmm. If you don't face it, I tell my students, face your weaknesses with sword in hand.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dramatic statement for saying, don't put off, fixing these issues that you have.
Right.
And I did that for, 16 years.
Right.
Finally, a year ago from now, I got another endocrinologist. The old one left the country. So I kind of just was going with my GP, who was keeping my medications up and, trying a few things here and there. But finally, I was having a lot of problems with my professional life related to the side effects. And that's what gave me the wherewithal to really go after it.
Meaning the side effects, like gastric issues and trying to do your job at the same time, or what?
That's one of them. Mm-hmm. I was thirsty constantly. I had to pee all the time. It was really an inconvenience. But the thing that really put me over the top is I'm a trumpet player, professional trumpet player. That's how I make my living. I teach trumpet at the university level, and I play in orchestras and all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, here I am, 60 years old, and my endurance on the instrument, which is a factor, you have to have great endurance to be a working trumpet player. Right. It just went in the crapper. I would play great for 10 or 15 minutes and then crash. Everything would crash. Yeah. And this went on for a long time. And I was thinking, I'm going to have to quit, which of course I can't do yet. And I started researching why this would be. I talked to a lot of people, and I started checking on the side effects of metformin. And I didn't really find anything at first. And then I discovered an academic paper on metformin and lactic acid buildup.
Oh.
And I discovered that metformin causes you to hold on to lactic acid longer, in some people, longer than normal. And, the muscles here, or the muscle in my face, mm-hmm. Next to my lips, would be the muscles that would break down. And I thought, gosh, I wonder if it's the metformin doing this, because nothing else made sense. So I went to my endocrinologist and I said, first thing, I have to get off metformin. I told her why. She was all for it. Up to this point, I should say that I had a misconception about insulin. In my mind, somehow, I don't know how, going on insulin to me was just the beginning of the end. I thought that I should be delaying going on insulin as long as possible. Mm-hmm. I just didn't know. I don't know where I got that thought, but I thought that insulin was like the last resort, which of course is, a terrible way to think. So, I was doing all these other drugs, Invokana, metformin and Trulicity. So, I found a Facebook group. It was maybe the Dexcom group or the Omnipod group. And then I found your group, and she got me off metformin and on MDI, and she did it right away. And within 3 or 4 days, my endurance started to come back. I mean, it didn't take long at all. Yeah. But suddenly these issues that I have not been able to get through a concert or even a practice session were gone. It wasn't gradual at all. It's just almost instant. So she got me on MDI, and I read Think Like a Pancreas, mm-hmm. and I started listening to your podcast. I listened to all the basic ones, and not to be too sappy about this, but I think that saved my life. That saved my career, without question. That saved my career, because it taught me that using insulin in the right way was a very healthy way to deal with your diabetes. I also changed my diet, of course. Mm-hmm. I didn't just, go on insulin and say it's good.
Well, were you able to start exercising?
I still haven't really done that.
Okay.
I still have all those jobs. Mm-hmm. My kids are grown and out of the house, but the psoriatic arthritis is a is a factor there. I have also really big time back issues.
Okay.
So I can't really walk very far. I don't have the ability to swim anywhere or do anything like that regularly. So, I have terrible discipline when it comes to exercising.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I have not been able to throw that into the pot. Maybe, I don't know, maybe when I retire, but I won't make any promises there.
I find myself right now recovering from COVID, which turned into bronchitis. And so I'm currently on a steroid pack.
Yes.
I find myself twice this year on a steroid pack. The first time was in the summer when I got bit by something and had like this very bizarre allergic reaction. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the point is that I've now used a steroid pack twice in like a 6 or 8 month span.
Yeah.
And as soon as I start taking it, I start losing weight. My back stops hurting. My digestion gets easier. And I was standing in the shower today getting ready to talk to you. And I thought, I'm going to call a rheumatologist and I'm going to set an appointment and just tell them that story and see what happens. Because it's clear that some sort of inflammation is slowing me down.
Yes.
I mean, on a normal day, I couldn't sit here and twist in this chair like this. My back would be stiff and it would hurt and painful. And if I overstretched it, it would hurt for days after that.
Yeah.
And steroid pills, 3 days and I'm okay.
Prednisone is a magical drug.
Yeah. You got to find out why it's working like that, though.
And they thought it was going to cure everything, and then they discovered the long-term side effects.
Right.
I had COVID for 8 weeks. I had long COVID. I'm just now getting my taste back. The first time I had it, it was like a cold for 2 days, but the second one really killed me.
Yeah.
And I had terrible fatigue every day for 2 months. Fortunately, I'm on sabbatical. Mm-hmm. So I was able to handle it schedule-wise. But I had some dose packs in there too.
Yeah.
Because I had terrible lung issues,
I had 6-7 days in the middle where my fevers just went, I was just hot and cold constantly. Couldn't sleep, but I was incredibly tired. I'd sit up till 5 in the morning, just like awake like I was on something, Then I'd fall asleep at 6, wake up at 9. There are 5 or 6 episodes of this podcast where I don't know how I did them. And I'm never going to tell you which ones are which, but I would get done sometimes and be like, well, that was it for me today. Like focusing and having a conversation for an hour, and then I was done.
And you didn't have any choice. It was like, okay, I have to lie down now no matter what's on your schedule. And that happened to me too.
Yeah, wrecked me. How were your blood sugars during the illness?
Well, they were kind of up and down because of the steroids. Mm-hmm. I was trying to compensate for them, but didn't have a lot of experience with that. Plus, I'm getting steroid injections into my back at the same time. And so I think I handled it okay. But, my A1C went up a little bit during that time, 2 points. Mm-hmm. 0.2 of a point, I should say. So I think I weathered it pretty well, actually.
Great. So you said you went from metformin to injectables. And I want to clarify that for people who might not understand, because they might have thought you went right to insulin, but you didn't. You went to some of those medications. You said Trulicity. Were there other things in there?
Oh, I was on Trulicity and other pills for a long time. A year ago is when I went MDI.
Okay.
But Trulicity, or something like it. I tried Ozempic for a little while. And I was doing Invokana, metformin, glimepiride, maybe one other in there. And, in November of last year is when I went to her and said, I want to get off that so that I can save my career.
Yeah. Did any of those medications impact your weight?
Yes, actually. Trulicity helped me keep my weight down. For me, that's still really high, but I was very consistent while I was on Trulicity. And since I dropped Trulicity and went on insulin, I've gained 30 pounds.
Okay.
Which is the issue I need to address now. I didn't know at the time that insulin can cause you to gain weight, and that it's very common to gain weight on insulin. Everything else got so much better. I was just giddy. My playing came back to normal, and
felt like you could eat again the way you wanted to, and all that stuff. Not really.
I actually changed and, went low carb.
Okay.
And that was a discovery period. I discovered that I have to eat some carbs. I can't go no carb.
It make you crazy after a while?
Oh gosh, it's amazing what that does to you.
So long time ago, before people talked about it like this, I read a book, and the doctor was like, if you go low carb, it was just a diet, kind of like a diet fad. I forget what it was. And my wife and I did it when we were really young. We were like in our 20s, and I lost a bunch of weight. She did too. And, but there was this day we sat down at dinner and I was like, I can't eat another fucking chicken wing. Like I can't, you know what I mean? I just can't, and the grease that would go, not like we were cooking pounds of hamburger and drinking it or anything, but just something with grease in it. Every day you were like, I just can't do this anymore. But, I can't believe I can't think of what that diet fad was called back then.
Atkins.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But yeah, I know what you mean. Every once in a while you're just like, can I have a piece of bread, please? I want the texture of my mouth to change,
Well, that's one point. But for me, it was, I would eat to get through to my next meal without shakes or weakness.
Oh, okay.
And if I didn't have any carbs at all, I couldn't do that. I would be really out of sorts mentally and physically. So I finally discovered I had to have a little bit in each meal.
Do you think some of those injectables were lowering your blood sugar too far without the carbs?
No. I wasn't having lows.
Okay.
It feels the same, but for some reason, I need that in my diet.
It's interesting. Okay.
But I cut way back on them. I used to, not be concerned myself with any carbs at all. And so I became more aware of how damaging that is. But I really am careful to not overdo it.
Okay. I do want to highlight one thing you said and talk about it for another second. You said, I didn't realize that the insulin would cause me to gain weight. I always think it's important to tell people that insulin doesn't make you gain weight. Insulin helps you store the calories that you eat. And it's just important for them to have that context. So if you're taking in a surplus of calories, your body's going to store it as fat, and the insulin helps the storage process. You may not be gaining weight while your blood sugars are super high, but you're killing yourself in a different way, and your body's not able to store some of those calories the same way. So you can, when you hear people's diagnosis stories with type 1, and a lot of them will say, I was eating everything I wanted and losing weight. And I thought, I finally did it. You know what I mean? I finally figured out the code. It doesn't work that way. But then people get it into their heads, well, I can't take insulin because insulin will make me gain weight. And so I'm here to tell you, insulin doesn't make you gain weight. Insulin stores the food that you take in, those calories. That decision is where that comes from. So,
well, I knew that.
Yeah.
And, my A1C has gone up a little bit and my weight has gone up a lot. And, I think I don't have as much. I figured out how to eat less carbs, right? But I'm a lot hungrier, and I think not being on Trulicity is part of that. I might go back on it. I saw my endocrinologist yesterday, and she wants me to put me on a new drug. The name I'm blanking on right now. It's brand new. It's only been out a couple of months.
Right.
It's used for diabetics and also, weight control.
There's a lot of consternation right now in the media because I forget one of the drugs that's a type 2 injectable that also helps with weight. I must have got popular amongst influencers online. Yeah. And now there's a shortage of it. And there's a section of people who are very upset. They're using up diabetes drugs and everything. But what people might not know is companies are marketing those drugs that way. And they developed them. They were developing them for type 2. And along the way, they realized this is an effective weight loss thing too. They're not trying to hide that. It isn't people. It's not like people going like, "Ooh, look what I figured out." It's on the company. They marketed it for two different things. If they're running out of it, they need to make more of it. Not,
right.
You know what I mean? You can't blame the guy on TikTok who figured out he could lose 100 pounds on Trulicity or Ozempic or something like that. So, anyway.
Well, Trulicity is made by Lilly, and that's exactly what happened with them. So this new drug is also made by Lilly, and it's supposed to be an improved Trulicity.
Okay.
So basically, they refined it, and it's supposed to be much more effective in both areas, weight loss and blood sugar control. And it's only been out like 2 months. So I think maybe this new drug is in part a response to what you just said.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get it, and I hope it works for you.
Yeah,
you know?
I hope to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, Michael, we can sit here and, there's a whole different way to have this conversation, right? You could be on a different podcast and they might be like, get out there and work out. I don't care if your back hurts, blah, blah, blah. And listen, and they might be right. I always think those people don't take into account, when you hear somebody say, it's a famous person will say, like, just work out. It's not that hard. And I think, yeah, sure. You have $1.9 million in your bank account. You get up in the morning and you go, here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to have a breakfast. I'll sit with the kids for a bit. I'll go for a walk with the dog. I'll work out. I'll go make my podcast for 2 hours. And then if we all had lives like that, then I can see turning to everybody and going, you're lazy. Go work out. Like, you've got all this free time. Your life and my life, to be honest, but yours more specifically, I don't imagine you find yourself standing around a lot going, I don't know what to do next.
Never.
So you can tell people, and I don't think it's wrong, get exercise, move around. You have to. It's incredibly important. But I don't think that means that for the people who can't accomplish that for either reasons of, deteriorating health, time, money, whatever it is, that doesn't make those people a write-off. If injecting something in their ass once in a while is going to make them lose 50 pounds, all right, it's not the perfect way to do it, and it might not be the way that some people want, but everybody deserves to have the best, healthiest, easiest life possible. And I say do what works,
Fortunately, that's what that's her approach.
Right.
She's not lecturing me about less calorie intake, although she did want me to do bariatric surgery. That's a whole nother issue. Mm-hmm. She was really pushing that on me, and I really looked into it, and I just decided it wasn't going to be for me. I mean, I was pretty positive I couldn't even do what's required to qualify for the surgery. There's a whole laundry list of things that you've got to prove to them that you can do in terms of diet and exercise, right? That I thought would be unrealistic for me. Plus, you just hear all the horror stories. My daughter has a master's degree in nutrition, and she was adamant that I not do it. So other than that, and, she accepted my decision. She did not press.
Right.
And she doesn't press on the other things either. She just helps me deal with things. I mean, after a month of listening to your podcast and reading Think Like a Pancreas, I went to her and said, I want to be on CGM and insulin pump. And she did it immediately.
That's great.
I mean, I got on Omnipod 5 weeks after I started in MDI. So, it takes an endocrinologist support to make that happen.
Sure does. Yeah, especially right now. CGM, for example, if you're type 2 and you could really benefit from a CGM, I don't think it's available to you through insurance unless you're using insulin. I think that's how it's written right now. And
I got the CGM first.
Did you really? Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I got the CGM when I went on an MDI, when I started insulin.
Oh, but you were on insulin.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, you have to be on insulin to get a CGM at the way it's written now. I know that.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be that way. I believe that. I think if someone would have put a CGM on you 10 years ago,
yes,
it would have made you think, oh, hell, this is not going nearly as well as I thought it was. I need to do something else.
Without a doubt, having that information in your face on a daily or hourly basis would have changed things much earlier for me.
Yeah.
And if I just simply had the information that insulin works better and is not the beginning of the end, if I'd just known that, I think I probably, could have gotten to this point 5 or 6 years earlier.
Yeah, it's such a shame when you were talking about it earlier, because by thinking that oh, insulin, that's the last step before I die. Because that's what you were thinking, right?
Yes, precisely.
So, so you're trying to stave this off. When, meanwhile, had you started it, the last decade of your life might have been, better, I guess is the word, Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably overall I would have been much healthier and much more aware. I just pretty much, put it on the bottom shelf and didn't really think about it and took the pills religiously. And I did doctor, I got my A1C checked every 3 months, and it stayed fairly in the range until it didn't.
When you have diabetes and use insulin, low blood sugar can happen when you don't expect it. Gvoke HypoPen is a ready-to-use glucagon option that can treat very low blood sugar in adults and kids with diabetes ages 2 and above. Find out more. Go to gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with pheochromocytoma or insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. The Contour Next One blood glucose meter may be cheaper in cash than you're paying for your meter right now through your insurance. That goes for the test strips as well. Head to contournext.com/juicebox to learn more. While you're there, let your eyes fall over some of this information. For instance, the Contour Next test strips feature remarkable accuracy as part of the Contour Next blood glucose monitoring system. They are the #1 branded over-the-counter test strip, and they offer second chance sampling, which can help you avoid wasted strips. Did you know that up to 100 test strips every year can be wasted due to application errors? Now you know. Head over to contournext.com/juicebox to learn more about the Contour Next One. The Contour Next One is my favorite blood glucose meter. And I mean, in the entire time that my daughter has had diabetes, this is my favorite meter. It's easy to carry, easy to use, super accurate. The screen is easy to read. Even the light is bright. The one you use at night. contournext.com/juicebox. No kidding around. It's a great meter. It's not expensive. Head to my link. You can buy it right now. There's a buy now button on the front page. I'm clicking on it now. Takes you to Walmart.com, Amazon, Walgreens, CVS, Meijer, Kroger, Target, Rite Aid. You decide where to get it from. I don't really care. Just use my link. And by the way, this is the same meter you would use if you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes. If you could put yourself in front of a bunch of people who were in your situation, why do you think, a couple of questions. You're here doing this, so you don't have whatever issue it is that I kind of brought up at the beginning. But when you look online, there's this vibrant community around type 1 diabetes.
Yes.
And you would think the numbers were mixed. You would think that there were hundreds of millions of people with type 1 diabetes and 1.5 million people with type 2 diabetes based on the way their voices are amplified. But instead it's completely flip-flop, right? There's so many people who have type 2. It's not a big community. I've seen companies and organizations try to start type 2 stuff. They never take off. Communities don't take off. I have type 2 people on and then get a couple of notes inevitably. Stop having type 2s on. What? And I'm like, this is a podcast for type 1s. And I'm like, this is a podcast for people who have diabetes. And
it's not a contest.
Yeah. And if people are going to hear your story and I have been able to get some people with type 2 to come on. All of their stories, I have to be honest with you, I don't know them up front when you come on, but now you're the third person that told me I have type 2 diabetes. I found your type 1 diabetes podcast and I'm better off now. I did not expect that. I'm happy about it. But now how do I get this information into the world so that other people in your situation listen to that and go, okay, so insulin's not death, or I'm not failing if I do this, or if I can't lose 100 pounds magically on my own first. Do you have thoughts about how to get through to people on that?
Well, first of all, I would say that most of us that are on some kind of pills or even injectables, it's head in the sand. We're not dealing with it like type 1 people are. when it's life and death.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like a second-class citizen in these forums and when I listen to the podcast because type 1 is so much more serious. I feel the pain I feel for these parents who are up all night and scared to death their child is going to die in the night, and having to deal with that seems just so much more significant than what I've had to deal with. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of type 2s, you know, they're just, they say it's a slow death, but you know, it's not in their face. So it's really easy to put it on, like I say, on the bottom shelf or put your head in the sand. And, you know, I wouldn't have read that book. There's no way I would not have found your podcast. I had to go after it. I finally had enough and just decided I needed to figure this out. And I, you know, like everything else, I did some research, mm-hmm. and that's what led me to it. But I don't think a lot of type 2s, you know, who are not feeling great symptoms, and you know, I was that way for over 10 years. I just don't think it's on their plate or right in the front of them on a regular basis.
It really is. I guess it really is what I've been thinking forever, which is just that if it's not going to kill you today, then it doesn't put it at the top of your list. And then it eats at you so slowly. And then there's this moment where you fall off a cliff and it's too late by then. And so when you have time to when it's the time to take care of it, you don't feel the push to take care of it. By the time you feel the push, it's probably over.
I don't think it's ever too late.
No,
you know?
Tell me.
Well, I'm a good example of that. You know, my symptoms went away just you know, by controlling my sugars, mm-hmm. that I had totally ignored before, and I think I'm going to live a long life. There's no indication otherwise. Heart is strong. So I don't think, I mean, sure, you can keep your head in the sand until you're on death's door.
Right.
But at some point, even for me, 15, 16 years after diagnosis, at some point, if you can get to the point where, hey, I really need to address this, I can't ignore it anymore.
Right.
Then I think you can not recover, right? You don't recover from it. But you
stop
can
the backslide,
manage it.
And your body can recover. It just might not be back to when you were 25. But
right.
I appreciate you putting more context to that, because that is what I meant. I didn't mean like, you know, if you wait 5 years, it's too late, just jump out a window. I meant like what happens when your body tips over to the point where there's no return. But yeah, if you're listening to this, today's the day.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like you want
That's
your
the
A1,
message.
Yeah, your A1C needs to be lower and it needs to be stable. You need to be able to eat food without seeing large spikes that last forever. If it's a CGM that helps you, being fastidious with a meter, using insulin, I don't know, some of these injectables are once weekly. I don't know how much they help people or don't. I've never talked to anybody that's, do they keep your A1C at a 7, but you don't check all week, so you don't know if your blood sugar is 250 or 300. I don't know how it works,
That's how it works. Yeah. Precisely.
So it's giving you lower overall numbers, but it's not killing a lot of variability.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
I still have the spikes.
It just gets you back.
Yes.
Yeah. What was it like to go from those injectables to insulin? What was your learning curve on figuring out how to cover your meals and you're taking basal, I imagine too. You're wearing a pump now. Yeah.
Well, I'm a gadget guy, man. I love gadgets. I love figuring out technology, and so I went all in. Mm-hmm. I put a ton of effort into learning about how these devices work, and frankly, your podcast, Defining Diabetes, that series, and it was eye-opening for me.
Oh, I'm glad.
And it just made me want to get it to work like you make Arden's work. Mm-hmm. Right. I was inspired to do that. And so that, I wanted the tech and I wanted it fast. Unfortunately, my endocrinologist knew how to get that out of my insurance company. Because I didn't like MDI. But I saw the results through MDI.
Right.
And then, I'm hearing about Omnipod, and I'm like, that's going to work with my lifestyle better than anything else that I've seen. And I can't wait until I can get Omnipod 5.
Oh, that's so interesting, because that stuff should work. Boy, that should work so well for a type 2. It really should, right? Yeah, that's an exciting idea. Are you eligible for that?
No. It's not indicated for type 2, but my endocrinologist told me yesterday, I saw her yesterday, that she has one patient whose insurance is paying for it now. So I think there's hope for that pretty soon.
That makes a lot of sense for a type 2.
I'm going to go after it. And there's a lot of travails with learning how to use this. Even with the podcast, which is just remarkably helpful, and the forums, I'm in a couple of Omnipod forums. You can ask questions there and get great answers. Yeah. It still took me a long time to figure out how to make it work in my lifestyle. Okay. A lot of trial and error.
What were the first stumbling blocks?
Controlling spikes. I still have problems pre-bolusing. I forget. Mm-hmm. It's just, so commonplace now. I think for me to really control spikes better, I need to pre-bolus 45 minutes and an hour in advance. And, my meal is the last thing on my mind at those times. Yeah. So often I'll be cooking the meal and it's like, oh, shit, I need to pre-bolus, and I hadn't done it. So then I have to stop what I'm doing and find my PDM and calculate what I'm going to eat. I don't really do that anymore. I kind of ballpark it.
Right.
Which is probably why my A1C went up 0.2 of a point.
Well, is that because you're using too much insulin or too little?
Yeah. Well, I'm just not nailing it like I used to.
So you're getting variability again.
Yes. Yeah. And I've had some lows that were scary for me.
And then you got to eat.
Yeah. And I never had lows a day in my life. So that was a new experience for me. So, it seems to be a moving target, but I just am not giving quite as much brain space to it as I did in the beginning. Mm-hmm. I'm not really counting carbs. I'm like you, I'm looking at a meal and saying, okay, that's 35 or that's 40 or that's 45. I hardly ever think it's 50, but, sometimes I have to bolus and then 2 hours later bolus again because I missed it.
I would also wondering if you're doing a lot of, you're still lower carb, right? But but you're eating carbs. Are you seeing protein and fat rises, do you think?
Yes, without question.
Okay.
So earlier on I was doing extended boluses, and, now I don't do that as much, or if at all, and I should, but, I'm staying in range. My clarity says I'm 94% in range. Well, the range is too wide, and I think if my range on my CGM were narrower, and I don't think I haven't figured out how to change it. And she said I couldn't change the range because I think it's 70 to 180
in the clarity report.
Yeah,
you can change that.
Okay.
Yeah. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure where, but my clarity report's 70 to 140 for Arden.
See, I think that would be much better for me.
Yeah.
Because it'll spike up to, 160, 170, sometimes 180 because I didn't pre-bolus. And I know that's why it's doing that. Or I didn't extend the bolus because I'm eating a lot of protein, which I usually do. Mm-hmm. I'm a barbecue guy. I do a lot of cooking. I love to cook. So I'm just not giving it quite as much thought. My A1C yesterday was 6. Before that it was 5.8.
Oh, good for you.
That's wonderful. I went from 8.9 to 5.8 in 3 months.
Wow. That's excellent.
So, I think I'm doing really well. And so I can kind of put it back aside a little bit. And I realized yesterday that no, I can't do that. I really need to stay more on top of it and use the tools that I have more effectively.
Right. And it's not the numbers. The numbers help you. They guide you through it. But you're not just trying to not be 160 for 3 hours. That's not the point. The point is it's health. It's the thing. It's the thing you can't track until, you know what I mean? Like it's you either feel okay or you don't. And the oddity, of course, is that once you don't feel okay for a while, that feels okay. And that's part of the slippery slope, right?
The norm.
Yeah. It's a little bit of crack, Michael. Just a little bit of crack. Yeah. Then 2 years later, you're laying on a sidewalk folded in half, and and that really is it's what happens. It's a slow water torture. You don't notice it at first. It's drip, drip, drip. And then suddenly your A1C is 7, then it's 8, then you're tired, then the muscles in your mouth don't want to work. And then, and you just and you can only compare back over a week or two in your mind. That's why pulling up that report's helpful. And what you're saying is, if the report said to me, hey, I'm not in range as much as I want to be, that would fire you to do the things you need to do.
Yeah, I came in after I got the pump on my next appointment, which was 3 months later, and my A1C had plummeted, and my clarity said all that time I was like 95, 96% range, and I was the king of the hill or mountain, I should say. I felt so good about myself and how well I had done, but I think that's a little bit false.
Well, nothing wrong with it, but then want more, right?
Yeah, I want to be more accurate, and so I think if I can figure out a way to change it to 140, I'm going to be maybe 80% in range, and she told me that, my number is ridiculously high compared to her other patients, so again, that's an ego boost and you feel like you're really kicking ass, but I think I could kick more ass if it was just in front of me all the time. Oh, I'm high. I'm 160 and that's high.
I agree with you.
I can do that mental calculation, but I don't.
Right.
But the screen telling me that that's high and reminding me of it would be better for my health.
Well, what you're describing is no different than 16 years ago where you said, well, I took the pill, so I'm good. Right? Like you're looking, no one wants to listen, Michael, no one wants to do this shit. You know what I mean? Like no one, there's no one who's sitting around going, I'm super excited to take care of my diabetes today. Right. It's a situation you find yourself in. You have to re-level your brain and rejigger your expectations for what life is. Because if you keep having the expectation that I'm Superman, nothing's ever going to happen to me, and then this stuff comes on your life, well, you might get to be Superman for a much shorter time than you were hoping to be, So why not bet on yourself and give yourself longevity? And imagine that, maybe one day you'll get to stop playing the trumpet for money, but still get to play it for pleasure. Imagine those sorts of things being the truth for you. I just think it's impossible for us at any age to imagine the future. And you have to try hard to do that. I've been talking a lot lately about watching my mother get older. And I just heard myself on an episode I put up yesterday, but that I recorded 6 months ago, where I told the person on the episode, I'm 50, but now I'm 51. And my mom is 80. And I am now believing that I'm in the last 15 good usable years of my life. And she says at 65. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to die at 65. I don't think that I'm going to be infirmed. But I see my mom at 80, and this is not a party. And then I start looking backwards at her through her 70s. That wasn't a party either. So these are my 15 years to do something amazing. And then I'm going to decline. And hopefully it's a slow decline through my 60s and my 70s. But the person I am in my head today and the things I want to do, I don't imagine a 68-year-old me is going to be able to accomplish.
Right.
And if you don't take the time to stop and think of it that way and not be burdened by it, I'm not upset by the idea. I'm actually excited by the idea. Like for the first time in my life, I have enough context to realize that this time is not infinite. I was 20, I thought it was infinite. I was 30, I thought it was infinite. I remember being in my 30s and thinking, I'll raise these kids. And then that's when, but what I didn't know was then that's when COVID was going to come and my knee was going to need a surgery. And I didn't have those expectations when I was 30. So you apply this idea to diabetes I mean, live now.
Yeah.
Live as best as you can now, and that's going to give you more later. I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, my mom died at 68, and the last 10 years of her life, she was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like her. I mean, I look like her. She was overweight. I'm overweight. My sister's overweight. I mean, it's a genes thing too. And even that wasn't enough for me to change anything. I was motivated by career and family and hobbies, things that I really enjoyed doing.
That you could control and that you were good at controlling too.
Yes.
Right. Whereas the weight and the exercise all feels, I know it subconsciously, it feels like this is definitely going to happen to me. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yes.
You didn't grow up in a, I'm imagining you didn't grow up in a household where you had tools for that stuff.
Nope.
Right. And you grew up in a household where people worked hard and had fun and cooked food, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then
precisely. Yeah. There were times when I really tried hard on the exercise and diet thing when I was in my 40s. And, I had some success, but it took so much time and energy and brain space. And this isn't a cop-out, but, so I would yo-yo for a while. And finally I just said, screw it. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to make use of this life and this time now, in career and family and other interests, because it was just dogging me constantly. And, to lose the weight that I did, I think the lowest I ever got as an adult was like, I was 325 at this time. So I really needed to do it. And I'm glad I did. I think I got down to 260.
Okay.
And so creeping up to 270 and staying there for years and years and years was okay. And the diabetes was looming, but, I was taking the pills and then taking the injections. So, I didn't make exercise and diet at all a priority. Now that I'm on the pump and, very hyper aware of this, I'm still not exercising. And I have great excuses for that. I can play those, but, at some point I'm going to have to figure out how to do some of that too.
Right. Well, listen, I play devil's advocate a lot on the podcast, and I argue both sides because, I think it helps. And I said earlier, you're not rich. You don't have infinite time and a gym in your house, but no one can tell me that they don't have a half an hour to just walk out their door, walk 15 minutes in one direction and walk 15 minutes back in the other direction. And that would be, I think back to when I was a kid and my aunt and her kids one summer just decided they were going to go for a walk every night. That's all they did. And I'm telling you, this is in the 70s, right?
Right.
Nobody understood nutrition. Trulicity didn't exist. If you had psoriatic arthritis, you know what that meant? Your elbow hurt. Nobody, you know what I mean? Like nobody was looking into anything. And so my point is that with very little fluff for the things that are available now, my aunt started going for a walk. And I'll be damned that 3 months later, when summer ended, she looked terrific. You know what I mean? Like she just was a person who worked hard. She owned her own business. She was pretty sedentary. And she made an hour for herself to go for a walk. It changed her life. Yeah. It genuinely did.
Well, we have a new puppy, so I have another excuse to, do a half-hour walk. And I have actually started walking with the puppy for you. Like a week now, to just try to train him up, And my wife did exactly what you said. She went on Noom, and she's a small woman, but she lost a lot of weight and has maintained it. But she also retired in that time.
She had more time.
Yeah. When she started, she was still working. But,
okay. I have a friend, I'm going to say her name. I've never said it on here before. She's done so much for this podcast that you guys will never know about, but Natalie. And she went on Noom. And to be honest with you, when she did it, I didn't think she was not a person I looked at and thought, well, you better find a diet plan of some kind. Like she looked terrific to me, but my goodness, is she in just, I don't know what the hell it is. I don't know what they do, man. Is she in terrific shape?
Yeah. It's really worked for her.
Yeah. That's excellent.
So I'm looking at retirement probably in 2.5, 3 years, hopefully, if things work out well. So, maybe then, but, I'm on sabbatical now, which is a kind of a mini retirement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still playing the trumpet at night, like always. So that's a factor. But I got more time than ever, and I haven't used it to exercise.
Well, I hope you do. And I hope these other things are obviously working great for you. I just saw the other day, it was like more of a Financial Times news story, but I think Omnipod, I don't want to say this if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. They're going to try a basal only. I think they're going to try to introduce a basal only pump. And I assume that might be for, the emerging type 2 market where people are like, you could use a little help, but you don't need injections at, in a bolus at meals. Wow. I don't know. I just saw it come across my news feed. I think it's great. Like, I know there are people who are going to say like, oh yeah, it's pharma and device manufacturers trying to push it. Just do a sit up and go for a walk, and all right. I don't know. Like, I've never had type 2 diabetes. You've just described something to me where do a sit up wasn't going to help you.
Right.
And you don't deserve for your life to go to hell because of that, and nobody else does either. The people listening, like, you guys have got to I think the first thing is to get your information together before you go to a doctor. Because otherwise you walk in and you get the first thing that comes to their mind or the thing they do in the office or whatever. You need to go in and say, hey, I think this is what's happening with me. Do you agree? And if you agree, I think this is what I should be doing about it. Can you help me?
That's precisely what I did.
Right.
You just described it to the T.
Good.
And, fortunately, I found a young, knowledgeable, dynamic endocrinologist that was like, okay, I think you're right. Let's go. Yeah. And we did it fast.
Good. Yeah. Listen, metformin has a ton of great uses. It's really it's a good drug. But you go to a 60-year-old doctor, he's going to give you metformin.
Yeah.
You start talking to him about a continuous glucose monitor, and he's going to stare at you going, I don't know what the hell that is. So, you need to go to somebody who I've had a friend on here who's a doctor who told me he won't go to a doctor who's over 50. And he's a doctor who's over 50. So,
that happened to my sister. She was being treated and still is by her GP, who's older than I am. Mm-hmm. And she finally convinced him to give her a CGM, but she's still, MDI.
You have to understand
many, many problems.
That your goal for yourself might not be the doctor's goal. The doctor might see you in a completely different way. Listen, when we talk about big ideas, like, how it, when you talk about like government issues and people get upset, well, they're not thinking about me. Well, they're not. Mm-hmm. You're right. You're a number, you're a statistic, and they are statistically trying to keep the country moving in a direction that's good for most people. And that can happen in medicine too. Like, you might leave there thinking, I'm going to kick this. Michael is going to I'm going to pull this together. And that guy might look at you and think, hey, if we can keep that guy alive 5 more years, that'll be great.
Yes.
I don't want people thinking about me that way. Yes. You know what I mean? Yeah. And
that's a great characterization.
Yeah, right. Your desire for yourself might not be their goal.
Right.
And they're not going to tell you. Like, you can't look the doctor in the face and go, hey, you're just managing me into the grave, right? That's what you're doing here. They're not going to go, oh, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. No, they're going to say, no, this is the best idea. They might look at you as a statistic, and you shouldn't treat yourself that way. Listen, apples and oranges. But my mom, 3 days ago, oh God, Michael, this is not going to make me cry, I don't think. But 3 days ago, my mom moved into a new place. Mm-hmm. A year and a half ago, my mom was preparing to move from Pennsylvania to Wisconsin to live near my middle brother. Mm-hmm. We were getting things in order for that, and she was staying in Pennsylvania long enough for my younger brother to get married in October. And in the weeks leading up to my brother's wedding, my mom's health deteriorated in a way that was frightening. She was clearly dying, to the point where we had her in the hospital a couple of times. Nobody was giving her answers. And we had to take her to my brother's wedding in a wheelchair. a woman who did not use a wheelchair like a week before that. And the day after the wedding, my brother and I, my middle brother and I sat down and I said, Mom's dying. Like, I don't know what's happening, but she is. We're going to stop listening to whatever these doctors are saying. I'm going to take over. And I put her in a car and I took her to a cardiologist. I literally made them see her. And I said, if this is not cardio, tell me right now. She examined her. She said, it looks like heart failure, but I don't think that's what it is. Back to the hospital. It's COVID time. We're sitting in the waiting room for hours. My mom's bladder is so full, it's just spilling out of her. She can't, but she can't urinate. This has been going on for a while.
Crazy.
I go to the woman at the desk and I say, you have to go drain my mom's bladder. I made the woman at the desk do it. And she was kind and she did it, but she was a nurse. She went and did it. And then later when my mom got imaged, because that 2 liters, Michael, of urine they took out of her.
Oh my gosh.
They were able to see her cancer when they imaged her. But every other time she was in the hospital, they imaged her with the full bladder and couldn't see the tumor. Isn't that crazy? So
that is crazy.
You figure out it's cancer. It's bad. It's a softball size on one of her ovaries. She's got it in a couple of other places. Doctor comes in, looks at her, says, she's not strong enough for surgery. He sends her to a rehab center. Go to the rehab center for 2 weeks. Really kick ass. Get yourself in shape. A week before, Michael, my mom was fine. This had just deteriorated her so much. And then she does the rehab, passes everything, and we just don't hear from the doctor. He had no interest in doing the surgery on my mom. So I pin him down on the phone. I'm not going to kill your mom in surgery. And I'm like, is she going to die anyway? And he goes, yeah, in a month or 2. And I was like, well, then she wants the surgery. Give her the surgery. No, I'm not doing that. If my neighbor's son doesn't grow up to be an orthopedic who went to medical school with a girl who grew up to be a gyno-oncologist, I don't know if my mom's alive.
Right.
Take her to the doctor's office. Doctor says you're going to be dead in 2 months if we don't do this surgery. I'm happy to do it for you. Right. A year later and a month later, my mom moved to Wisconsin and moved into her new place.
Wow.
If we would have listened to the first doctor, she would have died about 9 months ago.
Right.
It's just, you have to be the one to say, I don't accept what you're saying. And you keep saying that until either you get success or it's over, but you don't give up while you have the breath to say it. That's how I see it.
Be your own advocate.
100%. Yeah. But it's easy to say that to people. Be an advocate for yourself. But what does that mean? That's why I tell my mom's story, because a lot had to go into this to make it happen. My mom doesn't have any money. We had to run this through Medicare. My brother had to teach himself the Medicare system. We were going to appointments and sitting in I would record this podcast, go to a hospital, sit with my mom all afternoon.
Right.
I'd leave. My brother would come in, sit with her all night, and it was hard, but now it's fascinating. You should see her. And by the way, then she had to live in a home for a year to get her cancer treatments. My mom then had to go through chemo and she fought through the whole thing. But while she was there were things about her health where we were like, hey, she seems like she's retaining water. And they would make 1,000 excuses. In the last 50 days, my mom's lived in Wisconsin. She had to stay with my brother to establish residency. My brother focused on her health. The picture I saw of her yesterday, she looks incredible. They changed her medications and did things for her. The place she was living at was supposed to do, and they weren't doing it, It's I don't know. You either want to be alive or you don't,
Yes.
And it's not as easy as just get up in the morning and go to work. And I'm sorry, it's not, but it isn't. So take care of yourself. That's all.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm sorry. I got
Great
on that
message.
thing there.
No, it's important.
What are we not talking about that you want to talk about?
Seriously, Scott, I think we covered it really well. I had a few talking points in my head as I prepared for this, and I think we've hit them all. the overall message that I want to send to type 2s is to just do a little research. There's so many resources out there. I read one book and my life was changed. I discovered one podcast, and it isn't even done by a doctor, right? I found one podcast, was captivated by the subject matter and the way it was delivered. And anybody can do that. Anybody can find a book or an online forum where people have been through it who know a lot, who know, some people know as much as your doctors do. So I would just encourage those of you that are in the position where, you're just now starting to, deal with type 2, just get your fingers going and find out that information. I delayed it way too long. I'm a smart guy. I read a lot, and I am professional in a lot of ways. I have a lot of interests and things that I can do. And if I had just made this one of them earlier on when I was first diagnosed, I'd probably be in a lot better shape than I am now. So,
well, I'm glad you found it. And that's a great message. I put up you've talked about the Facebook group. So for people who are listening and don't know, I have a private Facebook group that has 30,000 plus members in it.
Yes, it does.
They're all talking about, day-to-day stuff, management ideas. They help each other with problems. I find it to be the kindest place on Facebook I've ever seen. And
it's awesome.
I worked hard to get it that way. So I'm proud that it moved that way. But I put up a post the other day. Because, a couple of times a year, my frustration gets to be too much, right? So my frustration my background frustration is constantly that I know what this podcast does, right? I've heard your story and almost 1,000 others like it. And it's still hard to get the word out. Like, it's hard to get people to start to listen. And so my biggest hurdle is to just try it. Because I think if you try it, you're going to be okay, So I put up this long post and I just said to people, I wish you would listen to the podcast and share it with people. It'll help the podcast grow. When it grows, it gets bigger. When it gets bigger, someone else is diagnosed, then they find it. And then the post sort of started turning into well, here's what the podcast has done for me. They're trying to keep the post alive so other people see it, which is lovely. And one of the people said, I was an adult type 1. And I found this thing because so many people told me. And then I get there and the host doesn't have diabetes, isn't a doctor. You know what I mean? And she said, she was like, what am I doing here? And then she said, it was just kept happening. Just people kept saying, you should do this, watch this, listen to this. And she finally did. And then she describes her success and it's wonderful. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm good at talking about this, Michael. I really don't. We can all guess about it. It's to help my daughter and everything, but it all just comes together for whatever. When you and I got on before we started recording, you said, oh, you have a great voice for radio. Even that is dumb luck and maybe part of why the podcast works. You know what I mean? So
that's part of it. Definitely.
Yeah. So anyway, I know I don't have diabetes and I don't have type 2 diabetes. I don't have type 1 diabetes. I've never been to medical school. I barely graduated from high school, Michael, for all being really honest with each other, but I'm good at this. So let it go and go find the Defining Diabetes episodes, the Pro Tips series. What else helped you?
Well, I read Think Like a Pancreas.
Yeah. Gary's book.
And that was before I started on the podcast, and he mentions the podcast in there, and a bunch of people online had mentioned it. So, it was multiple mentions, like you said a minute ago.
Kind of pulls you along.
That got me listening to it, and I listened to it in the car when I was commuting.
Right. It's perfect timing. And Jenny, who by the way works for the guy who wrote the book that Michael brought up.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
She's on the show once a week where we talk about management stuff. So
love her.
Yeah, it's terrific. All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for spending the time talking about this with me. I hope more people with type 2, I hope they find ways to help themselves, really is what I'm hopeful for. And I am going to go quickly pack a bag and drive down the Eastern Seaboard to pick my daughter up from college. That's the rest of my day. So
great.
Yeah, great for you, but I'm going to be in the car for 12 hours. So.
I know, but you get to see her.
It's exciting. Yeah, we're all really excited to get her home. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. And I'd like to thank the Contour Next One blood glucose meter and remind you to go to contournext.com/juicebox. Get an incredibly affordable and accurate meter. You deserve it. If you're interested in being on the podcast and you have type 2 diabetes, please find me and reach out through my website, juiceboxpodcast.com. If you're looking for support, check out that Facebook page, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. It's a private group. You'll answer just a couple of questions to be admitted, and then you'll be in there with 31,000 plus members, all who have diabetes, use insulin, understand what it's like to have to watch what you eat, count carbs, the whole thing. Go find them. It's a great resource. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Don't forget, when you support the sponsors with my links, you're supporting the production of the Juicebox Podcast and keeping it free.